the listeners are catching the discussion around ChayaLeah's itinerary for her trip to Israel in a couple weeks.
Yep.
So in case anybody's going to be in Israel in a couple weeks, ChayaLeah would love to be harassed by her fans.
Oh yeah. I would actually. You can come hang out with me and 40 college students that I'll be dragging behind me everywhere I go.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What's better than that?
I know. Well, it makes it all what we're studying right now, which is like Joshua. And now we're going to go into the book of Judges. That's the incredible thing about being in Israel is that you
Makes
see
it real.
the names of the towns, you see the places where the wars were fought.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an incredible opportunity to like connect with the Bible.
Before we get into our topic today, I wanted to ask you,
Richardson.
I wanted to ask you guys: have you been watching the show The Pit on HBO?
No.
So the show's phenomenal. First of all, it's with Noah Wiley, and it's basically it's the whole
my
series.
Father's friend.
We don't know Wiley.
Yeah, my father hung out with him.
Really? So you might be interested.
Years ago.
Oh, okay.
He was a young guy.
So this is interesting though. So he's the head of it's a day in this emergency room in a Pittsburgh hospital, and he's like the head. He's running the whole show, and so he's this very put together guy who's like just seems totally unflappable. And I won't do any spoilers aside from a small spoiler. So if you're watching it or you want to watch it, just mute for a second. But it's not a big spoiler. So towards the end of the season, he starts to have this sort of emotional breakdown, which is an understandable breakdown. And he starts, and this is on an HBO show. He starts saying Shema.
Oh,
wow!
Really?
And so anyway, so this younger doctor finds him. He's not exactly, he's got a Star of David on. They don't know exactly he doesn't know exactly what he's doing. And so later on, he comes back and says, what were you saying? And he explains the Shema prayer to him, and talks about why he was saying it and what the significance of it is. And
That's
so I thought that was pretty, that was pretty interesting, I thought.
Someone said they love seeing Jewish stuff in the wild. Like not related to the news of the war or like anything that has to do with October 7th, but just seeing something randomly Jewish always feels
it's shocking.
Yeah.
There's hardly any Jewish writers in Hollywood.
Yeah, right.
It was interesting because his name on the show is he has a very Jewish name. It's Dr. Rabinovich.
Oh, yeah.
So
I just saw
he's a very. So I was wondering if they were gonna. I was wondering if they were going to do anything with his obvious Jewish, if there was a reason they named him a very Jewish name. Anyway, I thought that was
so
kind of interesting.
I just saw the clip of Larry David when he finds out that his lawyer is not Jewish. You know that clip? Because he thinks his lawyer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Berg.
Yes.
His name is Berg.
Yes.
And he's really upset. Anyway, I don't know. That just reminded me of that. Okay.
Anyway.
So
let's get into it.
So as ChayaLeah said, we're going to follow on with our Bible discussions. So we did Joshua last week, and this week we're getting into the next book, which is Judges.
Right.
This is a long one, and there's a lot happens. This book almost, after going through the 5 books of Moses and Joshua, and then knowing the later books, this book feels like it's kind of on fast forward versus some of the other books. But so we're going to probably go through this in 2 or 3 episodes to divide it up. But my first question about the book is, why is it called Judges? Because I think to a modern reader, when we think about the concept of a judge, it's not reflected in this book of what we think about it as being a judge. Right. So why is the book called Judges?
That's an excellent question. Very, very good question, because we will find in this book, we take a steep drop in the concept of leadership. In the past, we've had 2 very, very strong leaders of the Jewish people. Moses, of course, in the 5 books of Moses. And last week, as we talked about in Joshua. This week, we're going to talk about a series of different people that come and go. Some last for a few years, some last for more than a few years. And the concept of judges was not only that they were judging people, but they were actually political leaders as well. So it's a kind of a misnomer just to say that these people were solely judges. They were, in a sense, judges, meaning that they were part of the high court and that they can judge people and do all of that
and
adjudicate. Right. Exactly. But also, more maybe even more important than that, they were acted as political leaders at a time when there was no real central authority within the Jewish people. The Jewish people kind of were split into 12 different units. The tribes were kind of independent. Each of them kind of received, although not yet. We'll find out in the beginning of the book of Judges that we had not conquered the entire land during Joshua's lifetime. But those tribes that were able to receive land acted kind of independently. They had their own justice system. They were Jews, yes, and they had the 5 books of Moses, yes, but there was no real strong political alliance between all of the 12 tribes. They had their own vested interests. The tribes that were agrarian had, that interest. The tribes that lived on the sea had their interests, and so everyone was kind of working independently, and the leaders or the judges that came about in this were sometimes able to rally and marshal the forces of the 12 tribes, or as we'll find out, here in today's discussion, that they were not able to, that they were only able to really rally and to inspire certain tribes, around themselves. But that's the idea. Judges should not be thought of as someone sitting in a high court on a seat. It's really, we were talking about political leaders who also served as judges.
And they were military leaders as well.
Yeah, right? And military leaders. Because that's more important than anything, as we'll see when we get into the stories.
Right. Who wrote the book of Judges?
Samuel.
Okay.
Samuel wrote the book of Judges, and he also wrote the book of Ruth. Because Ruth also comes into play during this period. So he wrote both. He did not include a story of Ruth in this because in the book of Judges, he only wanted to put in really stories that affected the entire Jewish people. Ruth is really more her own personal story with Boaz and eventually the ultimate birth of King David. So that's why he did not include that story in the book of Judges.
Oh, yeah, it's its own book.
It's his own book. Okay. It's his own book, and it's not part of the. It's not part of the what we would call the prophetic part. Right. The Nevi'im. It's part of the Ketuvim of the writings. Correct.
On the naming is what's the name in Hebrew?
Shoftim. Shoftim is a shofet. Right. Shofet is a judge.
Okay, so that's okay. So that is a direct translation.
Yeah, direct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know if we want to go through the story or if I should ask like a general question, but actually I'm going to decide myself because I'm in charge of this outfit. Before we get into the details,
oh my God.
of
whatever makes you feel special is we'll go with it. We'll go with it.
So before we get into like the details of the different judges and the wars and everything that happened, I just couldn't help but think about this idea, and I want to ask you about it. One of the things that we keep seeing over and over again is that the Jews keep going back to idol worshiping, right? They keep turning their backs to whatever the leadership says or what Hashem says and the Torah says. And it seems like every few years, the Jews become idol worshipers again. Why was idol worshiping such a draw? What was it about it in that generation or in those days? Because like you don't see a lot of idol worshiping today. I mean, what like first of all, what was it about it then, and what's the equivalent today? Do you think?
The iPhone.
Oh,
think about the iPhone.
Yeah.
I mean, if I said in a couple of 100 years from now, when we won't have an iPhone or whatever, I don't know how we're going to communicate.
Right.
But people will look back and they'll say, "What? People walked around with an iPhone all day, every day, and on Shabbat." When they shouldn't have used the iPhone, they used the iPhone under their blankets. People were cheating with the iPhone, and why do we have such an incredible attachment to an iPhone? It's not the phone calls.
Right.
Because we've had phone calls since the time when Watson, can you hear me? Or whatever
Right.
he said there, Bell, So it's not the phone calls that we're really interested. It's the entertainment part of it. It's the social media part of the iPhone. The word phone itself is a misnomer.
Right.
We should really rebrand it into an entertainment piece of what it is. Because most of the phone calls you make on an iPhone anyways end up being canceled. What? Who? Where are you? Oh, I can't hear
God.
you. Okay, so think about that.
Such a boomer.
So if you can understand that we have this the tremendous connection to an iPhone, same thing was true about idolatry in those parts. Now, there's two ways how to look at it in the book of Judges when it comes to idolatry. There's one way of looking at it is that Samuel put in all of the hot spots, meaning throughout history there were hot spots where people were idolatrous. A leader rose up, rallied them, inspired them, fought a war, and then they went back to doing what was right. The leader dies, they fall back. Another leader rises up. So it's like a pattern. It's a pattern. So during most of the time, the Jews were not idol worshippers. It was only when they were in a state of weakness, when there was no leader, they fell into idolatry. So commentaries, the traditional commentaries would say that it's an exaggeration to say that the people were bad during all of this period, during the period of the Judges. On the contrary, most of the time they were following God. But there were times when they fell into this, what we would call idolatrous situation. Hashem would send a judge. A judge would then come, whether they would fight a war or they would just inspire them or whatever the circumstance may be. And then they would go back, and then the judge would die. So it was, back and forth.
It's a cycle.
It was back and forth.
Right.
The other way to look at it would be when the Jews came out of Egypt. We know that in Egypt they were really involved in the Egyptian culture to a great degree. I mean, Moses had come; he did the 10 plagues primarily to arouse and inspire the Jews. I mean, they could have gotten out of Egypt for the Egyptians in one plague. They would have killed the firstborn. Pharaoh would have kicked them out. Moses did the 10 plagues in order to inspire the Jews that it was only really God that was worthy of worship. So that when we went into the desert, that that God is going to challenge us and is going to test us. So you're going to be prepared and know that really Hashem is the only one that really has the power to make us succeed in life. When they got into the desert, they thought to themselves, I'm saying they, God and Moses, that they had already accomplished their mission. That they did such a good job in Egypt, the 10 plagues, the killing of the firstborn, saving of the Jews, all of these things. And even among the Jews, those that didn't want to leave stayed in Egypt. So who did come out? People that were loyal to Moses and to Hashem. Then the splitting of the Red Sea, and giving of the Torah, they thought, that's it. They're cured. They're cured of anything that had to do with idolatry. What happened 40 days later? 40 days later, when Moses did not come back from the mountain, they made the golden calf. Now, even though that there was a small percentage of Jews that worshipped the golden calf, only 3,000 died, then there was a plague, but among the 600,000, you could say that the majority did not worship the golden calf, but they didn't condemn it either. They didn't stop it either. So in that sense, it became obvious to Hashem and to Moses, we have a bigger problem on our hands than just getting Jews out of Egypt, giving them the Torah and making them stay loyal. And during the entire period that they were in the desert, I should say the entire period, but parts of the time, they were questioning, and even again the story of the spies where we couldn't get into they questioned the ability of God to be able to fight wars for them. So this was devastating to them. So we already had the Jews kind of had already within themselves this gene. It will only get knocked out much later after the destruction of the first temple, where we completely lose this desire for idolatry. I'm just going to add just one more thought that I had seen. The Jews were not idolatrous in the sense where they gave up complete belief in God. They believed in God most of the time. They were more of what we would call monolatrous. Monolatry is this idea that there are multiple gods. Our God is real, strong, maybe even the strongest, or maybe even the most powerful, but yet there are other gods also who are valid. that's not idolatry. That's what we call monolatry. And Jews primarily, I think, were monolatrists coming into the land of Israel, where when they looked at the Canaanite gods, the Ashtaroth, the Baal, and if certainly if these people, the indigenous people, were successful, you can tell. I mean, throughout history that we would be, we would somehow succumb to the idea that they also have some power. So this is where the challenge comes in. But I would stick to the idea that, you know what, in the book, everything is exaggerated,
right?
Because you're focusing on such a small period of history at a time that everything gets blown out of proportion. So therefore it seems
they're not going to write about like an average day that nothing exciting happened.
Right.
And
I think I think it's an important point that you bring up, because when you read, I mean, Judges in particular, it seems like, oh my God, these Jews are just constantly screwing up.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is a good point that this is almost like the negative Instagram.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
It's kind of like the worst highlights of the Jews, that this is not the typical experience during this period.
No, but think about it for a second. I think this is one of the greatest proofs that the Torah is true. Because if you run and write a history about your people, this is the last thing you're putting in.
Right.
I mean, what kind of people are these?
Yeah.
I mean, God takes them out of Egypt, feeds them in the desert, gives them water, gives them clothing, fights their wars like we talked about last week at Jericho and other wars, and anything, blesses them, and all they do is turn their backs on him. What kind of people are these? So if you were really writing a history, you would whitewash everything. You would say, the Jews came into the land of Israel, they destroyed their enemies, they appointed great prophets and kings the kings were really great guys, and everything went hunky-dory, and it was only because of anti-Semitism in the world that we lost the temple. But no, we put in all of our warts, all of the worst warts that we had, we put in there. So this must be true.
You know what I found myself feeling as I was reading the book, this book of Judges, is like kind of jealous that the Israelites were so engaged in a way in their relationship with God, at least. And I feel like our modern version is almost apathy, like where we just don't even care. It's not even like people could be bothered being idol worshipers, because like we just have no sense of like the spirituality of what's around us, or the idea of like turning to a higher power. Like we're just so apathetic really to so much of it. And in a way, it's amazing that they had that kind of feeling, that they even wanted to worship idols or whatever, worship the other gods.
It's
religion,
I just thought about that.
Religion and spirituality played a huge part in biblical times.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't find atheists around where they said no God. If there was no God, meant there was somebody else, another God filled this place.
Right.
I mean, there was no concept of there's no running the show. Someone is running the show, whether it's Hashem or whether it's Baal or whether it's a son or whatever it is, or whether it's something's running the show. Only later on, I mean, this is quite quite recent, this idea of atheism, where there's no God and the world was created by a big bang. That's so today people are apathetic, and not only are apathetic, but our culture lends itself to ridicule spirituality. Now we're finding out that there's kind of a little bit of a backlash towards that idea that you're ridiculed, that only science could answer our questions, and only science is what's real, because science is verifiable and religion is not, and then you're an idiot if you believe that there's a secret man up in heaven writing down everything you do. You're a moron. But we're seeing more and more that people are turning, maybe not to old time religion, but they're turning to spirituality. They're turning into to things to mindfulness, and gratefulness and these things. But back in biblical times, you had to have a relationship with something.
Yeah.
I mean, your crops had to be grown, and someone was controlling that.
Right.
Now, if you were religious and you were faithful, so Hashem is the one that's doing that, and He didn't make it easy. Don't forget, because He ordered us to let the land lay fallow for every 7 years, and then the 50th year another jubilee year lay fallow. That's not an easy That's not something easy to follow. And when your non-Jewish neighbors are working their fields and they're selling their produce and you're sitting idly by,
right?
I mean, with tariffs,
you have to have a lot of faith.
With tariffs. I mean,
but I think you bring up a good point about how showing these shortfalls really enhances the legitimacy of the stories.
Yeah.
Because we all know people in our lives just on an individual level where when things go wrong, nothing's ever their fault.
Yeah.
It's always it rained. Bob didn't live up to his end of the bargain.
Right.
Whatever. Right. Someone's always got an excuse. And you never trust those people because you never know if you're getting the true story.
Right.
Whereas people who are willing to own up to their mistakes have much more legitimacy, and those are the people you can trust because they're going to give you the honest assessment of the situation as best as they know it. Right. So it really does add to the legitimacy of the
this is a real
story.
I would say this is a real biography, of the Jewish people versus hagiography, where you only put in the highlights of how great they were, how special they were, and what great things they did. This is real.
Yeah.
It's like some families are able to handle it. Like if I was writing a story about the history of my family and telling about my mother, she was nuts after the Holocaust, or saying, oh, my mother, she came out of the Holocaust
unscathed.
Unbelievable. I mean, she was like it was 6 years in Hawaii. I'm telling you, it didn't affect her. We grew up in a normal home. We had we had joy, and we were vivacious and all of that stuff. My father, he thrived after World War II. You should have seen him. My father was just a ball of laughs. You could write that, and everybody who knew my family would go, "What?
Yeah,
he's writing about another family. This was not the Perlmutter family."
Yeah, you're right. This is really the anti-hagiography.
Yeah,
totally.
Exactly.
Totally. It puts in all of our words. Brother against brother fight. I mean, we'll just get into maybe.
So So in the beginning, it starts off. The book I don't know if you want to do a little summary.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the beginning of the book starts off with more, trying to capture the land and settle the land with the tribes. And there's some back and forth about different tribes that did drive out the people and those who didn't drive out the other nations and had to live with them. I don't know if there's anything you want to say.
I do want to say
it's
because I think that's very relevant today.
Okay.
So very relevant. For 1900 years, it wasn't relevant.
Right.
Did we drive him out? Did we not drive him out?
Yeah.
It didn't affect us, and we never really understood what does it mean driving out. But recently, since 1948, this issue of living together with indigenous people and us being on charge, came up. All of a sudden, happens.
Right.
So Jews were not, really ready for leadership roles then. I mean, being able to conquer the land, because God clearly says, in the 5 books of Moses, when you get into the land, either one or two things. Either you get rid of them, and I mean get rid of them, like Luca Brasi style, give them an offer they can't refuse and get rid of them, or get them out, because they're always going to be a thorn in your side. Okay, which sounds great. Which sounds, you come into the, you're a strong army. You come into the land. You give them choices. Number one, you could convert. So those who wanted to convert, but to convert, okay, fine. One, most people will say, is shrimp kosher? No, okay, we're out. Okay. Number 2 is either get rid of them, and during the war, just get rid of them.
Right.
Or number 3 is exile them. We couldn't do that. And this proves, so true today, because when Israel, became a country, and that's certainly after the 67 war, when we had a chance to tell all of those Palestinians on the West Bank, you know what? You have 2 choices. You either convert to Judaism, which of course they're not going to, or get out. Go live in Syria, go live in Jordan, go live in Iraq. You have 22 countries that are Muslim. Go. We don't want you here. You have 3 weeks to pack up your stuff. We'll provide the buses. You're out. Now, what would have happened if we had done that back then? Who knows what would have happened? But just like in biblical times, we just couldn't. For whatever reason, the Jews conquered the land, and they lived with them. They lived with the Canaanites. They lived with the Perizzites. They lived with the Jebusites. They lived with all, and these people then turned against them because they weren't Jews. and they thought, oh, you're interlopers, just like we have today. You're colonizers. You came from nowhere. Go back to Egypt. Go back to Poland. Go back to Egypt. It's the same.
Oh my God, it's the same.
It's the same idea. Well, what are you doing here? You don't belong here.
Right.
It's not your land here. So it just shows us that there's a pattern in history.
Yeah.
Jews then couldn't get rid of their enemies, and they became a thorn in their side. And the same thing is true today. We can't get rid of our enemies. We don't even know what to do. We're stuck. We're stuck in Gaza. We're going to put the army in, put the army out, put the army in, put the army out. We close the border, we open the border, close the border.
Literally the same story that we're dealing with in this book.
And there's just one other interesting thing that I just wanted to mention in the beginning. It says that there were two tribes that went to war first, because the Jews cried out, who's going to lead us now? Now that Joshua's dead, who's going to lead us? So God said, Judah will lead you. Judah, who didn't play a big part, because Joshua was not from Judah, nor Moses was from Judah. All of a sudden, Judah now rises up to a position of leadership. We know that this is going to happen because, he was promised by Jacob that, what, the scepter will go to your hand and leadership will go to you. Okay, makes sense to me. Judah has always had this potential of leadership. But then he also includes his brother Simon. Shimon gets in. Now, what happened? What's this Shimon? Moses, if you go back to the end of Moses' life, he blesses all the tribes except Shimon. Does not bless Shimon. He had this antipathy against the tribe of Shimon because of what they did to him. When they worshipped the Baal, like with the Moab over there, with the Moabite women and all of that. So when they came into the land, the people didn't know what to do with this Shimon, with this tribe of Shimon, because on one hand he's a tribe, but on the other hand, Moses, never gave him any credence. So should we give him a piece of land? Should we not give him a piece of land? The end of Judah said, you know what? You come live with me.
Wow.
You come live with me. And Shimon lived within the borders of Judah. Eventually, Shimon became all the teachers and they kind of moved around the land of Israel, because Shimon had this passion and this zealotry that most tribes did not have.
Right.
Remember the story with Shimon and Levi?
Yeah.
So Levi, we got him to be the Kohanim and the Levim. But Shimon had this tremendous amount of passion and zealotry, which was like nitroglycerin if they all lived together. That when you separated them, it was great because you put them each in communities. They were kind of the guys that rallied everybody up.
Right.
So it was just interesting that Judah did this for the tribe of Shimon and said, you come live with me. And they lived at the southern part of Judah. And then when Judah went to fight the first wars, he said, come on, you guys are good warriors. Let's go together and we'll take care of that.
Right. That's interesting. I always thought of Shimon as sort of the I know this is terrible to say, but in my head, Shimon's always like the loser brother who misbehaves and comes home for the holidays and is has a drug addiction. I don't know why, but
what?
That's how I always viewed.
He's like the prodigal son.
I think I don't know. Most people fear that guy.
I know.
Because who was the one brother that Joseph arrested? Of all the 10 brothers, the one guy he was most fearful of was Shimon.
He
wasn't fearful of Levi. He wasn't fearful of Levi.
Right.
He was fearful of this Shimon because Shimon, was a guy who was older than Levi. He said, let's take out the city of Shechem.
Right,
I mean, 2 brothers.
I know, killed a whole city.
Then he told Joseph, I'll kill everybody here in Egypt. And, he would have probably done that.
Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay. So then I don't know if you have any questions in the first few chapters, Jay. No?
Go ahead. You can start.
No, I was just going to say that we go through what my father was saying before about the cycle where it's, idolatry, then comes along someone who chastises the people, and then there's the deliverance. And it's sort of the second chapter sort of frames that for the rest of the book, where it's just, that's what we're going to see over and over again. And then it starts with the stories about the specific judges, and it starts with the first one, who is called Othniel of Kenaz. And I'll just say, and then I'll let you guys talk about it. But I thought it was interesting because there's a story here where he goes in and kills the king. But what was surprising to me is that the king was in the bathroom.
No, not him.
Oh, it's a different one?
That's not him.
Oh, I forgot.
That's Ehud.
Oh, Ehud. Well, I was just happy to know there were bathrooms in those days.
No, only the king.
It made me feel better.
Those are what we call the royal throne.
Oh,
okay,
just the king had a bathroom.
I think it was only the king. Yeah, went to cool off his heels. Is what the expression is.
But I was pleasantly surprised to read that.
Yes.
Okay, so sorry. We could go back to Yael if you have anything you want to say about him.
But he was from a special family. No, he came from the family of Kalev. And when they needed someone to rise up and to go to battle, they were ready from the tribe of Judah. They went to battle, and then the interesting part is that they fought and they won Jerusalem at that time. They won the parts of Jerusalem. They won the parts of Hebron. Hebron went to that family as Moses had promised them. And this was all done only after Joshua's,
after his death.
nothing, But Ehud is an interesting story. Ehud, when he kills the king of Eglon, you see Eglon was the king of Moab, and he ruled over the Jewish people for 18 years. Eglon did not take on Zempic. Okay, he refused to take a Zempic. Many other people at that time were on the Zempic, but he was a fat guy, and he needed the bathroom quite frequently. Quite frequently. They tell this story, and it's funny because Ehud was he was a lefty, and he came in with a sword. Yeah, he was a lefty. He came in with a sword. He had a shriveled right hand. He came in with a sword, and he killed him in the bathroom while he was in the bathroom. But it's kind of comical, in a sense. But this just shows to the level of to the degree of self-sacrifice that these judges would go through, that these leaders would go. I mean, he gets an appointment with the king. The king is a very powerful man. 18 years he rules, and Ehud says, "No, you're dead, and I'm gonna kill you." And he goes in there, and he actually, does it, and then leaves and locks the door, and
and then they don't know where the king is, and they're looking for him.
Right.
So like I said at the start of the episode, this book's kind of seemingly on fast forward versus a lot of the other books we've read and that we will read. So they go through a lot, and in the version that I read, at one point they call these various leaders chieftains.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
So is there a relevance in differentiating between a judge and a chieftain, or is it just synonymous?
Chieftain would be the head of the tribe.
Okay.
I think that's always important to realize, that it was important who was the head of which tribe and where the rule and where the call came from. I mean, Judah, obviously, the chieftain of Judah was a powerful chief, and maybe the chieftain of Asher, maybe not so much, although that you never know who, God can choose to rule over you. We're going to read about Samson comes from the tribe of Dan, but that's what chieftain meant. I mean, a political leader.
So in this first section, there's Caleb, there's ChayaLeah mentioned, there's Othiel, there's Shamgar, there's a bunch of these. Is there any one that's in particularly importance to this book?
You see, it's interesting because these guys get short shrifted.
Yeah,
they only get half a chapter, for 3 verses. So so they're important because they come at a very crucial time. I mean, we're not yet united. We're still conquering land. At this time, we're still dividing land. At this time, so they come in a very, they're very important people at a period in history. But if you take, for example, think of the United States of America, the first couple of presidents everybody could name.
Yeah.
You got Washington, Adams, Jefferson, the first 3. After that, it starts to get a little bit more fuzzy. Okay, is it Adams 2 or is it Monroe 1? Who's exactly, except for David Sashwa, who can tell you.
Yes, he could say the whole thing. Yeah.
But then you get the 7 and 8. Who?
Yeah.
There's a Van Buren in there. There's some Polk. Whether Polk came before Van Buren,
Tyler.
There's a Hayes. And I'm sure that among these people they did some important things, like that guy who what's his name? He's on the money. I forgot what it is. On the $20 bill. Who's on the $20 bill?
Oh, Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, he played a big,
he's
important
a huge
role.
important.
He's important, but is he 9? Is he 8?
Right.
11?
Right.
I mean, which one? So Moses and Joshua, 1 and 2, everybody knows.
Right.
You're going to jump to Deborah. She becomes pretty important. Everybody knows. But between Joshua and Deborah, these people played a huge role. But because they only got short shrifted, in stories, that's what
It's
happens.
interesting because I
some-
have a
some only-
bias. I think I have a bias to the people whose names we know, like that we use still till today, right? Like Ehud, for example, is a
Ehud
common
Barak.
name. Right. Ehud is a common Israeli name. So I feel like we have a bias to the people whose names we still use versus Othniel, which you don't hear that very often.
The people in Othniel are going to be
I
very
know.
angry with you now. Our listeners who
know.
are called Othniel, we have a huge following of Othniels. See, I would say more Shamgar.
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 Shamgar,
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah.
many people are
Yeah.
really naming their sons Shamgar these days.
Right.
But really, in the first part of it, the really big one, I'd say, is Devorah. Devorah
Yes.
is really,
Yeah.
when we go into chapter 4 and 5, during her war, and of course her song, that already stops, and she plays a
Right.
big role, which tells us so much about what was going on back in those days.
Yeah.
Now, this is the incredible part about Torah study. And when you look at it from a historical point of view, all of a sudden we have all these great men leaders. Then, boom, it starts to tell us this woman, Deborah, and she sat there under her date tree and she judged. And she was also a political leader, as it's and a general. She's going to lead in battle. And you think to yourself, okay, what's the story of here? Is this society so developed that women rose to this level? I mean, think about this.
Yes.
It's so incredibly out of line with what we've had since the beginning. We've had great men. We've had Adam. We've had Noah. We've had Abraham, Sarah, okay? But it was really
The
Abraham's
wives,
story.
right,
There's
right.
Isaac, okay, Rebecca, but really it was Isaac, Jacob, the two mothers, yes. And then we come into the book of the Shemais. Okay, Yocheved gives
Miriam.
birth. Miriam, a small part, but it's the story of Moses and Aaron,
Yeah.
and then Joshua, big personality. And then all of a sudden, we find that the next big personality that we encounter is a woman. And so
Finally.
so what happened what was going on in this period? Was it that women were so enlightened, or was she an outlier?
Mm.
Probably she was more of an outlier than this was common. Well, you could say every second city had a woman judge or
Right,
woman leader.
right.
It wasn't so. I think Devorah was more really an outlier who had this level of prophecy, and so did Miriam, and so did Sarah. But here we're going to have really the first time where a
Yeah.
woman is going to be in charge
Right.
of something. I mean,
Right.
and an important move, because again, when you go to chapter number 4 and you open it up,
It's
because we're in dire straits, right?
Right.
We're being hounded, by outside enemies, and we don't know what to do. And Ehud, was gone. The great chieftain and who killed Eglon is gone. And what do we do? So here, all of a sudden we have now Devorah comes out.
Can I stop here for a second and just comment? I read some commentaries on the way that the book describes Devorah, because it starts off, Devorah Isha Neviah. Devorah was a prophetess,
Yes.
right? And then it says Ashes Lepidot, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of ways that you could translate those two words. You're going to go into this?
No, you go.
I want to just stop here because
great.
it says here, and so if you want to take apart those two words, it could mean the wife of Lapidot, right? Which could be the name of a person. But the commentaries have a lot of different ways of interpreting that. For example, one of them is that she was a fiery woman, because the word lapid is
Flame.
a flame. So it could
Torch.
mean that she was a
Like a
torch,
torch.
right? A torch. It could mean that she was like a fiery woman. She was very she was aggressive. She had sounds like she had a big personality. Another way of describing it is Rashi says that she used to make wicks for the tabernacle. She actually was the one who made the wicks so that they could burn the menorah and, light the menorah, etc. And then the last one is that she actually was the wife of Lapidus, who's could be Barak, right? Because the words, this is how interesting the Torah is. Like if you don't know the Hebrew, it's hard to understand a lot of this, but Lapidus and Barak both could mean like a lightning or torch, or they have the same sort of
Meaning.
meaning, and so they could be interchanged. And so Devorah was actually married to Barak. So that's how it says it. But I prefer the first explanation, that she was a fiery,
It could have been all three.
fiery woman. Yeah, it could be all three.
It's
true.
Right? They don't contradict each other.
They're not contradiction.
Yeah.
Just to add on that, Lapita, what you said about the wicks.
Yeah.
She did one other thing with the wicks. She gave it to her husband to bring to the tabernacle because he was
Right.
an ignoramus. So he didn't have much to do. She was a prophetess and she was a judge. He was not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Really?
Yes, that's what the commentaries
that.
say. And she gave him the wicks. She said, "Hey, Lapidus, go take the wicks to the tabernacle so they can light him." And then he would you could see him like getting on a donkey and going there. And then he would come home and he'd make dinner. And then
so
she'd make the
funny.
wicks. Say, "Hey, go back to the tabernacle, Lapidos."
That's so funny.
No,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, and I'm curious if you thought about this, but many times when the Torah mentions women, it often refers to them in their about their physical attributes. Like it will say they're beautiful,
Well,
they're very
inside
beautiful.
and outside, and outside.
But like it doesn't say that about Devorah. So I'm wondering if this is like, it was really her character.
No, they wait for the later in the story because then there's another woman shows up.
I know. Oh, that's my favorite story. I can't wait. Don't give it away yet.
No, we're not
my
giving
favorite
it.
story. But Devorah was really. I think I like it because I think that she was the judge and prophet because she really deserved it, not because she was beautiful or
no. If you
it.
read Maimonides, the Rambam writes about the criteria of who became prophets. Not everybody is merited to be a prophet. You could be a great person, a good person. You have to go through certain criteria to be a prophet. You were chosen, yes, but still you have to go through. And no question about it that Devorah is one of the great prophets of all times. And she comes and she now it's one thing to judge people, and it's one thing to give a prophecy that do tshuva and repent, and it's a whole other thing to lead men in battle.
Right.
I mean, so she calls Barak, who she thinks is the right guy to do this. And it's Ehud Barak. It's so funny.
I know.
And Barak,
the president, the prime minister of Israel's name was Ehud Barak, and we're
one of the smartest guys. I mean, by the way, but I'm not a great politician, but great military guy. But she calls Barak and she tells him, "Hey, you know what? It's enough that we've been maligned, and oppressed by this guy, King Yavin. It's time we got to go to battle against Sisera. Sisera was this great general that had this incredible army, and as God said, enough is enough. They've overstayed their welcome. Let's go to battle." Ehud. Now here's where I'm sorry,
but Barak.
I'm sorry. So here Barak. Here's where you learn something else. God sends you opportunities. He's not going to guarantee success. He won't not guarantee. But what he will do is he'll put you in positions of opportunity where you can succeed. And here's the big if that goes throughout history, if you take the initiative and use that moment of opportunity for doing and fulfilling your mission. What does he say to her? "I'll go, but only if you come with me."
Right.
And she goes, "Really?"
But that sounds kind of romantic.
Romantic? Dragging her into battle? Well, we don't know what's going to happen. It's going to drag her into battle. So she looks at him and she says, "Really?" I mean, I wish I was there at that conversation because I could just see her. This is where Jewish, what do you call? What do you call when you make fun of someone, but like really
imitating someone?
Not imitating, but there's a word that I'm thinking of: Jewish sarcasm. Jewish sarcasm. "Oh, you want me to come to battle with you?" I could just see her like, "Oh yeah, sure." Wait a second, let me go get my spear. And he says, "I'm not going with you unless you come with me." I mean, she her head almost explodes from saying this. Here I am. I'm putting you in a position where you are forever going to be known as the great general, Barak, who fought against Sisera, who had this incredible reputation, this fearsome reputation, that you are going to go out there, do battle against him, and you are going to be victorious with him. All you got to do is go out to the tribe of Naphtali, gather 10,000 guys, go down to this, do battle, and God will take care of the rest. No, I'm not going if you go. So she says, "Okay, you know what? I'm going to go with you, and forever." And I have to reference right now. I have to
No.
reference
Oh, no.
which movie? The Sandlot.
Oh, no.
Okay, when they go into cursing each other or putting each other down. Your mother likes bobbing apples. The worst is when he says, "You play ball like a girl." The other guy goes, "What did you say?" Like nothing else bothered him. That your mother's bobbing apples in the toilet and she likes it and all of that. That doesn't bother him. But when he says to him, "You play ball like a girl."
This is very politically incorrect.
I'm just saying, but this is
Yes.
biblical language. She says to him, "You will forever be known as the guy that needed a woman to come with you." Okay? Don't look at me. Just look at what it says over here.
You just ruined this. I thought it was so romantic. Now he looks like such a. You're right. It's
Okay.
so lame.
Well, she even says to him that she says, "I'll go, but you're not going to get any glory out of this then."
Okay, I'm
Right.
telling you.
Right.
I'm going to go with you, but your glory will not be on the way which you go. For in the hand of a woman will the Lord deliver Sisera. And think about that statement. I'm telling you, because in the hand of a woman will the Lord deliver Sisera. Now she doesn't say it was going to be in her hand.
Right.
She says in the hand of a woman, someone is going to get Sisera. Where you had a chance to take down. It's like going up against Mike Tyson. When he was fearsome, and you're going to be able to take him down, and you say no. You come with me in the ring, and the woman is going to knock out Mike Tyson.
Wow.
It's.
Do you think Barack Obama knows the story? I'm gonna write to him.
I think Barack Obama knows. Why would Barack Obama?
Well, he's named after
I'm sure.
Named, I don't know. Isn't he named after Barack?
No.
Well, you know what's interesting is
Barry. His name was Barry.
Yeah. His birth name's Barry. He changed his name
chose this
to
name,
Barack.
So
I wonder how he chose. That's a good question.
I know. See.
Chances are he does not know the story because I don't think he would have chosen that name.
Barack Obama, if you're listening to this episode, please let us know how you decided.
Inquiring minds.
Yeah. So, okay, go ahead.
So they go and they defeat. I keep on calling him Sisyphus. It's Sisera.
He never wins.
Never wins. And then book 5 is essentially most of it is just a song.
Chapter.
I'm sorry. Chapter.
No. You have to let ChayaLeah tell the end of the story of 4.
Skipped over the best story in the whole.
I'm sorry.
One of the best stories.
Okay,
which is
go ahead.
The story of Yael.
That's the best story.
I mean,
come on, ChayaLeah, tell it.
I mean, everyone needs to go and read it because it's really good. But basically,
tell the story.
Sisera is this big general. Everybody's chasing him. Everyone's trying to find him. And in a nutshell, this woman, Yael, who's actually married to, what was his name? Chaper, right? But that's not important because they
were kind of friendly.
Right. They were friendly. Exactly.
It's probably important to Chaper.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, she decides that she's going to take care of business with Sisera and she's going to kill him. And she basically lures him into the tent and he's tired and she says she's going to give him a drink. And instead of giving him water, she gives him milk and makes him sleepy. And then he falls asleep and she drives a peg into his head and kills him. And no one can believe it. And even Sisera's mother is like, "Where is Sisera?" Right?
Wait.
Oh,
that's later on. That's
right.
later.
She delivers. Doesn't she say, "Come see"? She tells.
No, then Barak comes into the camp.
Right. And
he's
she
chasing
says, "Come,
Sisera.
I have Sisera for you."
Yeah, here.
Right here.
Right,
come, I have
right,
Sisera for you. And she brings Barak into the tent, and Sisera's there dead on the floor, and Yael killed him. And so great story.
This great story.
And Yael is a great name. FYI.
Yael is a heroine. A heroine. Because she tricked him. I mean, why was he so comfortable going into her tent? Because there was peace between these people.
Right.
Between the king and her family. There was peace. So he thought to himself, she's going to hide him and then everything's going to go well. And but there's a lot of commentary to this story.
Okay, don't get excited. Don't get into it. No,
I'm not going to get into it, but there's a lot of commentary just going on. What was going on in the tent at the time.
I know.
What was going on in the tent at the time. But bottom line is, she
lure him?
She lured him in and, gave him milk and, and put him to sleep.
Put him to sleep. She was giving him chills, maybe.
Put him to sleep and he fell asleep. And then while he was sleeping,
Yeah.
She killed. It's a great story.
Listen, you have to use whatever tools you have. I give Yael credit. If she, if she had to,
I don't know,
compromise herself,
whatever it was. I mean, she's the heroine here, and that's exactly what Devorah had said.
Right.
That in the hand of a woman, Sisera will fall.
Yeah.
And look at what happened.
So we have two great women here, Devorah
and Yael.
That reminds me of the story of those two the two women in World War II, the sisters, who would lure the Nazi soldiers.
Yes.
And they would basically they would do that. They would say, "Oh, you want to have a good time," and lure them out, and then just shoot them in the head.
Good for them.
Good for them.
We have another story
for sure.
Also with Judith.
Yeah, well, then she cuts the guy's.
She cuts off Halifornis's head.
Right.
And another good story.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, but she carries his head to the gate of the camp. Anyway.
Hey, and
Jay wants to move on from this story.
This is,
but yeah, anyway, so then
it's good.
Right. Then we move into the Song of Devorah, which
is a common theme in the Torah, is that after a great victory, we do a little victory song. Like 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? Yael, hey Yael. Like something like that.
It was exactly like that.
It was
That's
something
exactly how it was.
And if those who were a little bit more creative, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4. Who for? What for? What are we cheering for?
Oh my God.
We're gonna have to cut that clip and you can use it on Ask a Jew.
That is incredible. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So so Moses did it,
right.
After the splitting of the Red Sea. And we have it a number of times that, Jews after a great victory, especially being saved from a calamity, they go into this great song of praise of Hashem. And Devorah writes something so beautiful. I mean, it's just too bad that we just don't have time to go through verse by verse. But
we had to memorize this when I was in school.
But when she just writes the one thing that I would just wanted to point out. I mean, kind of you could talk is that she mentions about herself. She writes about herself that she was the mother of Israel, and she came and she kind of gives herself a little bit of
she builds herself up.
She what?
She builds herself
up. She builds herself up, which most people would have no problem with. But when you're dealing with these kind of people that are very special and they're prophets, you're supposed to. Humility is really the name of the game. And she loses her prophecy for a little while because of that,
Yeah, which isn't fair because women often have to build themselves up. It's not like men are going to do it for them.
Yeah, but
women often build men up, but men don't often build women up. And so Devorah had to do it herself.
The open cities, in verse number 7, the open city seized in Israel, they seized until I, Deborah, arose.
Yeah.
I arose as a mother in Israel. So, it means she's giving, it's true. She's not lying. It's not like false, false, aggrandizement. But you're not. Humility is the best thing. Like Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth.
Right.
So that's something that we could learn from. Even when you're going to be successful, let other people sing your praises.
Yeah.
If you have to go around and telling everyone what a great philanthropist you are, guess what?
Yeah.
You're not a philanthropist. I mean, if everyone's saying, "Oh, look at that philanthropist," you're a philanthropist. But if you wear a button say "I'm a philanthropist," you're no philanthropist.
That's one of my all-time favorite quotes is a Margaret Thatcher quote when she says, "Being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to say you are, you aren't."
That's a great quote. No, that's
I say that regularly.
That's
yes, and that's true. And then you talk about how she criticizes. Because again, here she came and she called upon all of the tribes, and some went and some didn't go. And some said, "What does this have to do with me? I mean, I'm not being oppressed." So here she gives a lesson. You know what? Everybody thinks that you're safe in your own home. Like it doesn't affect me. I'm not going to get involved. What's my business? But here we know from history that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, all Jews are responsible one for the other. And Devorah was very upset with those tribes that did not heed her call, to come to battle. And she calls them out. You think just because you're sitting at the seaside or you're sitting far away from the battlefield, you're going to be protected. And we see this, very, very distinctly and in a straightforward fashion where Mordechai rebukes Esther for this. where Esther's
Right.
afraid to go to King Ahasuerus, and she says, "No, I can't go because I wasn't called." And he says to her, "Well, you think you're going to succeed just because you're safe in the palace?" And Devorah says the same thing. You think you're going to be okay because you're far from the battlefield? They're going to come after you too if we don't win. So you
Right.
know what? So this is
Just
a
join up,
message for
yeah.
for Jews all over, and we forget it because we like a lot of American Jews here. They're comfortable here.
Right.
What does Israel have to do with me?
Right.
I live here in California. They're 10,000 miles or whatever it is, 8,000 miles away. Well, what does it have to do with me? What's my business? What goes on over there? And just know that it's
It
your
is your
business.
I love at the end of this
Mhm.
song, there's this, I'll just read it, verse 28. It says, through the window she gazed. Sisera's mother peered through the window. Why is his chariot delayed in coming? Why are the hoofbeats of his carriages so late? And then it goes on to say that the wisest of her ladies answer her, and they're telling her, like, oh, maybe they're looting, maybe they're gathering stuff. And so the commentary is right here that Devorah was prophesizing that Sisera's mother, who was longing for her son and worried that her son was killed, what comforted her? What comforted her was the idea that Sisera was killing the Israelites and murdering them and torturing them and stealing their stuff. And that was a comfort to her. Like, she was wiping her tears thinking that he was being victorious. And it's such a commentary on like what our enemies are like. What mother in our world would sit by and be like, oh, I'm comforted by the idea that my son might be murdering other people right now. No, like, we want, like, where's your humanity? And like, Sisera came from somewhere, right? And you see it, and I think Devorah is making a comment here about his mother, that Sisera wasn't born out of nowhere. Like, his mother was evil, so he was evil. And just this idea that like the bloodthirst and the bloodlust that these people had is just something that we don't understand. And by the way, when we talk about relating it to modern times, we see it now too, right? We see it on, I'll never forget on October 7th, that famous phone call that they intercepted of the Hamas guy calling his parents, and he's screaming on the phone, I murdered 10 Jews. I murdered 10 Jews, and it's like everybody is so excited for him. And it's the same thing here. Devorah's commenting that like Sisera's mother was also a beast, and not in a good way. So anyway, I think we're going to stop here, right? Even though that's not the end of the book of Judges, we have a lot more to go. Very interesting stories coming up. But
next time we'll meet other interesting people.
Yes.
Get on.
Unfortunately, not no women, but
we'll meet women.
Yeah.
Delilah,
but not.
We'll meet
I was going to say we'll meet
women. Don't worry.
The kind we want to meet.
Come back. We have a very interesting story.
We do, actually.
though I do have a lot of questions around how intelligent was Samson actually. So
I don't know how intelligent he was, but I certainly wouldn't ask him that to his face. That's all I can tell you.
That's true.
Don't get angry.
No, I wouldn't ask him to his face. But now, whatever. 3,000 years later, I have some questions.
Yeah. He's coming back.
Anyway,
all right.
Thank you, everyone.
Good.
It was good.
All right. So we'll see you next week for Judges Part 2.